Hey, hi, I'm Kathy Futrell, and I'm going to be doing the second part of the still life painting. So here is the painting, and I'm going to begin by working on some of the details of the study. And maybe before I actually begin, I want to say some more things about the lights and shadows. So I have an illustration of three apples, which might be something you would want to work on. When you look at objects, and the light was actually coming from the outside window, we had highlights on top of the apples. As you can see, the whiter parts. This backside of the apple was darker, and to make one object show up in front of another when you overlap, which creates a sense of depth, you have to go a little darker from that object, and naturally that would happen. I shade, even when I'm using my brush strokes, I like to shade in a contour fashion like I'm showing you with my pencil point, so that I create a sense of roundness of the apple. Note that even though the light is coming here, I still have areas of light on the apple. Part of that is because we have variations in color. So this might be a yellow spot on the apple, this might be a darker red spot. But the overall effect is that the shadow side will be darker in general. Sometimes what we observe in the cast shadow, and this would be because the light is coming in this direction, we have a stronger shadow line directly underneath the object. And you will observe that most of the time that it's a very dark line where it touches. Sometimes you see what is called a reflected light. The paper, I had three apples on a piece of paper that would naturally reflect a little light. The reflection from this surface will often give light in the shadow side. So the object is shaded because this is the shadow. Often there are darker places on the shadow. Often there are reflected light, and excuse me, this is kind of a reflected light, but this is called a highlight. The highlight is where the white of the light bounces off a shiny object. Okay, so when we start today on painting this glass, we are observing, and I'm able, even though you can't see my still life anymore, I am able to start painting. And I'm going to be working with some blue-brown, which I'm mixing now in my palette, sorry. The blue-brown is a good color that I would use to create the darks and lights. So what I didn't finish last time, and I do need to put a little bit of green in this, I'm sorry, because my bottle is a green. I started painting where the bottle did show through this glass. So last week I gave it a start. Today I'm really observing. Matter of fact, I see my light has, I don't think my light has changed that much, but I did draw a reflected light here. I'm going to keep that reflected light. I see it moving over a little bit more. I'm going to have to keep the bottle darker on the outside, and what I see through the glass, actually it's pretty dark in a few places. And I have a lot of reflection, and I guess the reflections are coming from other light sources in this house, in this room. And I see a line going through here. I hope everybody's able to see the detail on this glass. It gets a little lighter. Is it okay?
Yes, it's very good.
All right, good. So I am seeing it be a little lighter. And funny thing is, I'm seeing some darks through here. And now I'm going to go back to a darker green. So I'm adding just a little more pigment, my green, my blue, my brown. So I'm going to end up with quite a dark color to paint the bottle. And I really want that to show up as different from what I'm seeing through the glass. Now I'll come back and do some more color where the drapery works. And I'm kind of ignoring the label on this bottle for the moment. I mentioned, and my bottle really doesn't have a label. It has some writing. I like to show that typically, but because I see some highlights through here, they're not really as light as some of the highlights up here at the top. And I'm going back over. Last time I was observing, oh my, I really do see a lot of change in the way the darks and lights happen. So sometimes you have to go over something like a dark glass bottle that I have here over and over and over. I'm going to take another brush with just water on it because this is really not white here. This is a lighter green. I must have had a stronger highlight there last time. But I'm softening these edges with this brush of water. I did have the other light on, didn't I, Jim? So, but I still see these lights pretty strongly. Okay, so I love the way all these variations happen in a glass bottle such as this. And I do see a few dark places through the glass. So I'm gonna add those as I see them. I'm also, while I'm at it, gonna soften with my water. My reflections here are not quite that vivid. So I just soften by dragging a little bit of the that green, green gray it actually is. Okay, so I feel like that represents that glass pretty much. Oh, I switched brushes. No, I didn't. Okay, so down here at the bottom, where this comes in contact with the drapery that overlaps, I'm keeping that nice and dark. And I keep going back to my palette and varying this green-brown color. Green, gray, brown. Okay, so to make this bottle color, I found that it was more green than brown, but I started with a gray, the blue-brown, and added my green. It's almost, you know, some of these wine bottles have an appearance of black. It can be so dark, but you have to look for the colors that are in the bottle. And this again is part of the drape. And this comes in contact with my shadow. And I'll be honest, right now, my shadow looks too dark. This bottle appears much darker through to my eyes than the shadow. The shadow is not as dark. So I'm really pushing my darks here on this side, and it's pretty much the shadow side anyway. I did appreciate seeing your still lifes this morning, what you have done, because you individually, especially with the change in the flowers, I had my daisies disappear, and I put in some pink flowers, and then they disappeared. I don't mean disappeared, I mean they kind of dried up and didn't look very pretty. So I like that overlap that's going on right here, and I noticed a few of you did that. It helps to tie your shapes together. And right now I'm just sort of working around that edge. And again, don't forget to keep observing your highlights. This seems to be so dark over here, and I'm going to go around. A lot of this area is highlighted. And then I have a highlight that seems to run right through here. And I'm going to come back now and soften a lot of that. It's pretty hard edge, and it doesn't appear, it's not at all like that. So now we'll try softening a little bit of this. And this has a light green and water. And I might be losing too much of that highlight. So I dabbed my brush and just added my water. The paint is wet enough right now. And that way I am, you know, I want to do something because it looks too choppy. I want to drag my brush down in a couple of spots. And obviously this needs to be toned down. That's too green. But I was able to make this more glass-like by dragging the brush. All right, now I'm gonna get up in here where it's also dark. Matter of fact, I thought all of you did a great job of your bottles. So let me finish up the bottle and I'll go back to the glass. This is the second coat up here. I do want to keep some whites. I don't want to lose all of them. And there is a strong line here. Oh, I see some stripes. It's interesting to observe any kind of glass. There's always so many more, on a shiny object such as glass, there's always more going on. And those reflections sometimes can include color. I'm starting to see some, there's the kitchen cabinets are showing. If you look hard enough, you can see the whole room reflected. Try doing something like a teapot, a kettle that does reflect the room. That can be quite a challenge. And I see the window. Goodness, if I actually see the window panes going on here. That's crazy. Anyway, it's a joy to observe. And I do want those strokes to go up and down, kind of like when I was talking about the apple having strokes going up and down, or around the contour of the apple. This is an up and down stroke to make the bottle. I feel like I've got the bottle a little tilted. I'm not sure I should have used maybe I'll examine this later and fix this side and balance it out. Matter of fact, I know I need to correct that. Somebody should have told me. I didn't notice it before. I think that helps a little. I hope so. Now I'm going to look and see if I see any more dark strokes, and I do. A few dark places in here. And I don't see that many dark strokes, but I do see that. I see a little bit of a triangle here. I think it helps to add a little dark through the bottle. It should be a little darker, more dark up here because there's only one layer of glass. And this is where I love to kind of get lost in the drawing, what's going on. I'm defining this little curve a little better and the reflection that's going on here. Or you can make a reflection really show up by putting dark around it. And I don't want to lose that white line that's right there. Okay, I am seeing through, I think I just touched my leaf here. I'll have to come back and correct that. You have to be careful where you put your fingers. So I'm going to try to show the reflections. There's a little bit of the green right here on the glass, and then what the background has behind it. And I'll work on the drape over here, and then I'll shift to the other side of the painting. So I do see some green. Hard not to place my hand on top of something wet here. I do see a little green reflected on this side of the glass. And it's just coming from the fact that the wine bottle is nearby, and it is picking up some green. And I see some strokes in here. I did add some the other day, and this is quite dark. And there are other little lines. They're going on. Okay, so now I don't really see any more dark. I do see some really funny reflections, but they're not green. I think they're more gray and reflect the towel that I have placed back here. Okay, so let's go to the background, and I'm going to switch brushes and use my flat brush to use my cerulean blue. I basically used my cerulean. I may have put a little bit of the ultramarine in there. So I have a puddle for the blue. I have one layer on the background that I did last time. What I want to do is a second layer for the background. And while it's wet or semi-wet, I'm going to do some variations. Just observing where I have shadows for right now. There's a fold in the material. And actually there's another fold down here. And I'm going to do this several times to build up, just observing where it's a little darker. And while that area is still wet, and then I'll go in the glass. For some reason, I thought maybe I better do the background, and then I take a little water and I remove some of the water, and then I just soften these edges. Now I've not got a real dramatic change. I just have a little bit of a change. I'm almost doing a dry brush here. All right, so this is a light area, and then right behind it, it's much darker. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that blue-brown with my blue. And really, the shadow is so dark right here, and I'm going to start with that dark. And then I'm going to bring that shadow here and come back with that blue. All right, so I've kept that light edge, but I don't like how hard it is here against the glass. So I've kind of melded it into the glass. And then I have a bit of a dark, while this is still wet, just a bit of the dark in this space here. It's a subtle way of creating that shadow. Now, here it's very distinct with this fold. And that might be a little dark. And I'm gonna switch back to my little water, my clean brush. And soften that line. Okay, so that's, actually this is quite dark back here. It must be because the bottle is creating a shadow in that area. And then this is a dark line. It's kind of like where this fold meets. I wanted to soften that a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to show the blues that I see through here, and they appear a bit gray. This because that shadow does come, it's not that distinguished, but it's a bit more. I see lines, and what I'm doing is kind of letting my eyeballs go back and forth to the still life and see. I think I need to use my water more. Well, this really does look kind of blue right here. And then when I jump down to this side of the rim, I have drawn some reflections, some highlights rather, excuse me. This needs to go away. I have the blueness of the background really showing through the glass. And I just keep my lights. There is more light through here. It looks like a lot going on. I think I've gotten a little carried away. I'm going to soften a little bit of this, but I really like the way that's working out. And I don't think I have to put a whole lot. I think I've kept enough of the lights. There's really one bigger little light area right here, but I didn't. Maybe I can surround that and make that show up. I think it's coming from the door at the back of the house. That's really weird. But a lot does reflect, and a lot becomes a highlight because of that reflected surface. Now, this coming through here is not very white. It's more of a blue. So I'm going to go with a blue. However, there are some spots, real spots of white, and I don't want to lose those. And this is very blue. And I did draw those highlights in. Often I'm asked, do you keep your pencil line in your work? I leave them, but a lot of artists prefer to erase those. See how I've outlined those little highlighted places? I tend to leave them, but that is a very personal choice, and I think you have to be the one to decide about that. I have the feeling of blue in here, but it's still quite gray. And I need to go a little darker here. I don't want to be that fuzzy. I want to be a little stronger with my line, but I may have to wait for that to dry. There is a dark line underneath the rim of this glass, the little pedestal part here. Well, that's close enough. All right, so I'm taking enough time on the glass and the bottle, and I apologize. So I think I'm going to shift this way, hoping that now you can see the other half of the painting for me to show you the apple and finishing up this part and the drapery. I'll start with the drapery to tie it all together, and I will show you this. The other day I did put a piece of tape here, which is another little technique for keeping a highlight. And it allowed me to do that. So I'll go back to my apple illustration here in a minute and explain my second coat, how I'm going to handle that. The shadow, however, the light is not coming as I did the other apples, but from this direction. I still have my light coming this way. All right, shall I finish the background? And again, I'm working with my cerulean blue with a little bit of cobalt, and I'm wetting using a real washy surface for that. You know, I didn't paint my cork. Well, that's an easy do. There is a shadow coming through here, so I'm going to leave that light spot. And there's not too many. There's another drape coming up. I'm working this color around. It's my second coat. And I stroke in the direction of that drape. I am a little convinced that I have swelled the bottle right here, and I don't know that there is anything I can do about that. What I mean is this line should have come a little straighter here. It looks like that line is off. Can I remove that? Maybe. Yeah, maybe I can. Okay, so I have to leave that alone for a minute. I know some of you know about Joe Miller, who runs Cheap Joe's Art Stuff, but years and years ago, we used to do, in the mountains, we used to have an event in Boone where we did these little mini workshops. And I did a number of workshops, and one thing that Joe did that I absolutely love to pop in on and watch him do, he used to say, I can fix any painting. He said, you give me a bad painting and I'll show you how to fix it. And he was quite humorous with that approach, but he did a lot of scrubbing out. He said, let's fix this. And I think that most paintings that we all work on ourselves that we know isn't quite right, that we should try to fix it. So I know today I'm going to try to fix this line. Okay, if it bothers you and it bothers, you know, you think it might bother your audience, you should try to fix it. I tell the story about making a crooked lighthouse, and Jim said, that lighthouse is crooked. I said, Jim, don't worry. When I get done with this lighthouse, I'm going to turn it side, I'm going to tilt it the correct angle in the mat, and nobody will know the difference. But I'm not really sure I can adjust that bottle, so I'll have to try to fix it. Here I have another shadow coming through here, and so I have a bit of light and the shadow falls here. So I'm just adding to that background color and keeping my form, bringing this darker area in. And you know, it does get darker when it goes behind objects. I think those were green shapes. See, I've changed my flowers again, so my flowers didn't make it from week to week. Sometimes it's better to do a still life, especially when you have fruit and objects in it. It's better to do it when you first set it up. And I think you can see this side. All right, so I've completed the drape almost. Here, I did do a little bit of the folds last week and gave you some shadows. So I'm giving a little texture across here. And now I can just add the water to soften that fold. And a little bit more, actually I've got some dark going on down here. And there's a more of a shadow to that. I'm darkening these shadows. And I'm going to soften the folds here. I've almost let that dry on me, so I'm going over it a little bit. And I'm just lifting and blending because that is still wet, thank goodness. And I know that this is dried. I let that go too far. So I'm going to just scrub a little with my water and then soften up around it. And that should help to indicate the fold that's going on there. This probably will need to go darker because as I observe, as the table surface through here, these areas are going to be dark when the drape comes down. I'll need to darken this, and I'll need to darken a little bit in here because they're casting shadows from these objects. This is my bottles are finished, my glass is finished, but I need to finish here. So quickly, I know I'm taking a little bit too long again. My apologies. I'm using my rose madder and a little magenta. Last week I popped these little flowers in, but didn't give them a lot of depth. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to try to put, there is a hint of foliage going on. And I think there were some little flowers maybe back, well, amongst the leaves here. All right, so I'm indicating a little detail, hopefully, and shadows that might have happened. Since my light is coming in this direction, some of these are not going to be quite as noticeable if we have them one behind the other. So I'm going to darken this one up. And darken these up a little bit that are back here. And let these kind of be in the foreground. I think this might have some shadows in here. All right. Then, boy, my apple seems to be more orange today. I want to really pop that. That was a really dark maroony apple. It had a little touch of blue in the red, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to give that apple, and then I'll come back to the leaves. I'm going to give that apple, it's looking at it, and it has streaks of a brighter red. The contour of this apple really does have, I'm going to soften all this, it looks kind of striped, but I am observing the feeling of this apple. And here I have to go in with a bit of blue and some dark. It's on the rim, okay. And that shadow color comes around. It's very dark down here. Again, I'm putting the blue in my red. And then I'm looking at how this stem shows up against that. It's sort of light on that rim, though. Because there is light coming across here, and I've got to soften where the shadow is. But there's some dark pigment in this apple. Okay, now what I want to do is soften the pigment, soften the color around the highlight. And honestly, it's not really white, it's just light there. And my stem is coming out of the apple. And I'm going to keep a little light right there, but not quite that much. So dark down here. But I also have a dark, that line of the shadow really does come around the apple. It's tilting a bit toward the still life. And in the drapery, which I have to return to, there is some dark right here. I have to make this a little darker in this area. It'll help to make the apple pop as well. It's almost like there's a, I don't want this to read as a line right here. Just want to soften that up. Okay. This needs to be a little cleaner, but that's getting there. Okay, and then I'll lighten this little spot. Soften that little spot there. On the vase that's behind it, I need to put a bit more bright color here. It's a blue piece of pottery, and even though it's got these highlights, and it's shadowed here a bit more. And then it gets pretty dark over here on this side. I wish I had left the little more, I don't know if I can lift this. Maybe I'll have to let this dry. I'll try to lighten this spot in a minute, but it needs to be a little bit lighter. It's grayer here, but this is really a lighter spot than I have it. So, and this appears to be pretty dark behind it. Okay, let's do the leaves, and we're gonna call this done, or done enough. And of course, I don't have these same leaves anymore, but I do like to show the veins of the leaves. I recall that they were, the leaves were pretty light green. Pop a little dark in behind some of these. I hope you guys aren't asleep. I'm almost done, I promise. Maybe I'll sit here and not quite finish every single leaf, but again, just indicating the veins here help. And anytime a leaf goes down behind something, kind of giving it a little more dark. Like these, the leaves that are over here would probably be darker green. As they are more in shadow. There might be a hint of the light on the ends of these, yes. And I know that this one would have a lot of light. And I've got to clean this little area up anyway that I started with correcting my bottle. I may have to let that dry. I think that needs to be covered more. All right, I want to pop a few more darks in these flowers, or rather the leaves, and I'm using my green, that Windsor green or that Joe's green, with my burnt sienna. That wonderful, wonderful brown. And I'm putting in, suggesting that there is a stem here, but some darks around the flowers. Like this would be some shape, like a leaf shape that's coming in from behind. It always needs the darks to pop all that out. And I feel like there should be something in here. All right, I'm gonna try to lift a little bit of light on that vase that I said really did have more light right here. And you can do that by taking water and sometimes just taking a brush that's a little stiffer and scrubbing in that spot, taking up some of the paint. Yes. I needed a little more light right there, and that helped. And you can just pick it up too with your tissue. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention. I'm hopeful, and if I turn this around, I'll come back to you and I'll show you the whole painting real quickly. And I do say, thank you so much for joining me today. This is pretty much the finished painting. Thank you.